Test, test, check 1, 2. You know you need unique New York. You know you need unique New York. Does that sound all right? Ah, that's better. You can always tell something's missing when you get isolated results, like AI that's only right for one of your systems. Get AI that can work across your data and applications. Learn more at IBM.com. The AI built for business. IBM.
Today on CityCast DC, there's a plastic surgery procedure that is booming among Washington men. Maybe not your neighbor or your friends, but among some of DC's most visible residents. Procedures to emphasize strong jawlines and prominent chins, which are growing in popularity here in DC. Journalist Joanna Weiss wrote about this square head phenomenon for Politico magazine. And today, I'm talking with her about how DC feels about plastic surgery and how faces come and go, literally, with presidential administrations. Today's Wednesday, June 25th. I'm Bridget Todd, and here's what DC is, let's be real, gossiping about. Joanna, thanks so much for being here. I'm pretty excited to talk about this topic. It's one that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
You can go down a rabbit hole with this one for sure.
Absolutely true. So let's start out with how things look in DC when it comes to plastic surgery. I know that cities like Miami, LA, Salt Lake City rank pretty high for folks getting plastic surgery. But what about DC?
DC, the aesthetic is a little bit different. And look, there's a broad range of doctors and medical spas and places that will perform all kinds of procedures if you want them. But for a certain set, the real DC power set, there's a relatively small number, I think, of plastic surgeons and dermatologists who are known to cater to high-powered people, and they cater to a specific aesthetic. And the aesthetic is basically like, we're going to pretend you never got anything done, right? It's like it's all a secret and you're going to look great and people are going to think you look great, but there's all this plausible deniability.
Oh, yes. And then maybe people will be like, I'm just drinking more water, just getting more rest, going to the gym,
Running through Rock Creek Park. Yep. Taking care of yourself.
In your Politico piece, you write about how DC's power elite, a lot of this, the entrances built into some plastic surgery clinics, it's like spy movie stuff, like staggered appointments, hidden entries, very cinematic. Have you heard about this sort of cloak and dagger goings on when it comes to folks in power getting plastic surgery? Is this a common thing?
Absolutely. And again, people who are in the know are in the know. And sometimes people will find out that there's a secret entry and then be a little taken aback that they weren't invited into it, right?
You didn't offer me the back staircase? I thought that was important.
Exactly. You got a ring to get in. No, I spoke to plastic surgeons and dermatologists who time their procedures around congressional recess so that way, you have to recover and there's a kind of a puffy phase of a week or two and nobody will know. And then there's a whole array. I mean, what I think has helped this whole industry blow up is that there's a whole array of dermatological procedures, these fillers, you get an injection of hyaluronic acid in your face, or you get Botox, and the recovery time is very quick. It's like going to the dentist and you come back and you look a little fresher. Who knew?
That hike in Rock Creek Park really did it, really took. So one of the specific surgeries that you explored, particularly men in power in DC getting, is chin implants, right? And so this idea of making your face look more masculine with a strong chin, how we sometimes associate strong chins with power and masculinity. And so this is the surgery that men in DC's power elite might be gravitating toward.
That's right. And this is something that has been going on for a while, to be fair. I mean, there have been plastic surgeons decades ago who were starting to pitch this procedure as a way to look more manly, to look more forceful, to look more authoritative. I spoke to one plastic surgeon in New York who had done his own study. He basically went on Google Images and took a whole bunch of images of CEOs, mostly men at the time, but even some women. He did a kind of an analysis of their jaw jaws and determined that they had stronger jaws than the rest of the population and started pitching that, right? Look like a CEO, look like you're powerful with your strong jaw. And I think the interest in that has only grown. It's kind of crept out beyond even the power set into the internet, the manosphere. Lots of people are interested in jaws right now and associate jaws with power.
What do you think is going on there? Like I have my theories about why strong jaws are associated with like masculinity and power and decisive decision making, maybe. But what do you think is going on? I feel like it says something very specific about gender, like our idea about gender and power.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think part of it could go back to evolution. I spoke to another plastic surgeon who was talking about how there are certain species where the men look very different, the males look very different from the females, and humans are one of them. And so anytime you exaggerate one of the aspects of masculinity or femininity in your own appearance, you just look more like that. So if you want to look manly, male jaws tend to be more square than female jaws. You make it even squarer and even stronger, you look more like a man. Then there's a theory about politics that during conservative times, people tend to go and look for those more gender-specific looks. And during more relaxed and liberal times, maybe the aesthetic is a little bit more gender neutral.
Yeah, you point that out really compellingly in your piece, how women in our current sort of conservative political climate are gravitating toward a more feminine look, and that it makes sense that pendulum would swing the same way for men gravitating toward a more traditionally masculine look. The gag in all of this to me is that like you have these super conservative lawmakers who rail against trans folks and gender affirming care. If you are not happy with the masculinity that your current chin projects and you get surgery to make it look more masculine, is that not gender affirming care? Like, can't we all agree on that?
Absolutely gender affirming care. And I spoke to another dermatologist who used exactly those words and said, yeah, isn't this ironic? And it's true. You know, again, there are certain times in history, right? There have been studies that have showed that in the 50s, when it was kind of a more conservative political and cultural climate, there was an interest in larger breast sizes. The D cup was more in vogue. Then you get to the 70s and things are a little bit more liberal culturally and politically, and you've got your, A cups and Twiggy, if you think back to these models who had really small breasts. And so these things are cyclical. They swing like a pendulum with whoever's in power and what the aesthetic is, but they definitely connect back to politics.
So what are the biggest spots in D.C., and how many spots are there in D.C. to get these kinds of procedures done?
I don't know if I could tell you the exact number, but I do know that there's a divide to some degree among these practitioners, right? There are some doctors who cater, again, to this powerful set, and they really push for this aesthetic of plausible deniability. We're not going to make you look crazy. We're not going to make you look like you have a lot of fillers in your face. We're going to make you look just enough a little bit better that people think well of you. And those doctors tend to turn away or discourage people who come to them and say, make my lips look like they're the size of Alaska. They will actually get clients and really steer them away from certain procedures. And I think people who want that really more, the internet-y aesthetic, if you want to look more like a Kardashian, you're going to have to go elsewhere.
Well, in the piece, you talk about what some doctors are calling Mar-Largo face, right? Like, I know about Instagram face, a very particular kind of look that makes you look like a Kardashian if you're a woman. Mm-hmm. And there might be a similar aesthetic happening where, when you get a particular kind of surgery or filler to look a certain way, perhaps that is going to be a face that we associate with the Trump administration or like people who are cozy with that administration.
Exactly. And I talked to one dermatologist who said she was getting texts from people all the time during the Republican convention a couple summers ago. Or was it last summer? The time has gone by really slowly. She said that during that Republican convention, she started getting texts from people saying, who got that work? And do you think that person got that work? And I know that person got work. And the people who were coming on stage tended to just have a little bit more of an overt look, like you could kind of tell they'd had work done. And there's a sense that some of the magazines, the Hollywood Reporter did a big piece about Mar-a-Lago face. There's just this idea that maybe that's the aesthetic among this set, and people who are all together in that social strata kind of like to look like each other. Maybe it's something that goes over on TV and the president likes. We know he has been on record saying he likes a handsome face. He admires people who look good and take care of themselves. Maybe that aesthetic is something to please him.
The CityCast DC neighborhood is full of sharp, opinionated Washingtonians, and I mean that in the best possible way. Seriously, at every live taping, somebody always comes up to share a hot take on an episode or the latest DC drama. And honestly, that is one of the best parts of doing the show. So we're teaming up with a new platform called Backroom to help keep those conversations going, and maybe even turn them into real solutions. Backroom brings people together in focused discussion rooms to talk through local issues, exchange ideas, and work towards shared takeaways. It uses AI to support the conversation, not by steering it or adding content, but by helping participants express themselves clearly and cutting through the noise that so often gets in the way of progress. Then, based entirely on the ideas and arguments shared in the room, Backroom proposes a clear, actionable solution that reflects the group's collective thinking. If you've ever wanted to go deeper after a CityCast DC episode, this is the place to do it. Help shape solutions for your block, your neighborhood, your city. Head to the link in the show notes to join the pilot or hop on the waitlist. Backroom, a platform for problem solvers.
DC cares about being green, but it feels like there is always something new to learn. How do I know what can and can't go in the recycling? And how do I collect compost without it stinking up my whole house? The list goes on. Thankfully, Paint Care makes responsibly recycling your leftover paint easy. Paint Care has 3 simple rules for painting smarter and reducing waste. 1, buy the right amount of paint for the job. 2, use up what's left. And 3, recycle the rest. To learn more or find a paint drop-off site near you, visit paintcare.org/3simplerules. That's paintcare.org/3 simple rules.
When it comes to wondering like who's had what, I'm not going to say any names, but we all know who I'm thinking of. There is one particular former congressperson who like the line of plausible deniability has been crossed. It's very clear what's going on. I'll just say that. And I do wonder, like, when you're in the public eye, some of these procedures you say are like kind of like going to the dentist. Maybe they don't have a lot of downtime. But if you're getting chin implants, how do you navigate the recovery time with having a job where you have to go on TV or have to, be in the public eye?
And part of that is the timing, right? And when do you time your surgery so that the recovery time is hidden? Part of it is that if you're working with really good, careful practitioners, they can reduce the scarring. They can do things as part of the process or part of the follow-up to really limit the effects, the after effects of the work that you've had done. And then part of it is this aesthetic choice. How much are you going to do at once? And if we're talking about the same person who went on TV with what looked like a dramatically transformed face.
Yes.
It was kind of like the whole kitchen sink, right? Like, we're going to do the eyes. At the same time, we're going to do the cheeks and the chin. And you start to pile that on at once, and I feel like it becomes unmistakable.
Oh, that unmistakable is the word I would use for this person that I think we both know who we're talking about. The last time that we had a CityCast DC Neighbors meetup, I was talking to my co-host, Mike Schaefer, about this, how there seems to be sort of two sects. The sects of like, people who are getting subtle work done where maybe the doctor is like, well, don't get anything that's too much. I don't want it to look like, obviously, you've had work done. And then there seems to be the folks who are going for the opposite, the folks who I would say, again, I'm not going to say any names, but I would say it's like very clear that you have had work done. You're not even going for a subtle, you're going for something else. And that does seem to be something I've seen, particularly in women in the administration or kind of cozy to the administration. The look of like, I have had a lot of work done, and it almost seems like I am intentionally trying to signal with my face that I have had work done.
No, that is definitely part of the aesthetic. And I mean, beyond DC, I think about someone like Dolly Parton, right? She is not shy about saying she's had work done. She's making a certain statement with the work that she's had done.
Costs a lot of money to look that cheap.
It costs a lot of money to look that cheap. She likes it. She has a reason for it. She's unapologetic about it. And hey, that's great. Whatever you want to do with your face and with your chest and with your body, right? It's your choice. I do think that, again, there are times when people get bought into a certain aesthetic. It just happens to be in vogue, or all of the people who are around you are starting to look the same way. And maybe it affects your brain chemistry, right? If everyone around you has these gigantic lips, maybe you want gigantic lips. If everyone around you has a certain kind of jaw or certain kind of chin, you want to keep up. So it may be the circles that you're in.
Has anyone ever confided in you about potentially losing or gaining political clout because of a chin? Like maybe they feel their chin is too weak. Maybe they want a stronger chin.
I think you see those confessions deep in the internet, right? You see it in these kind of manosphere subreddits and, listservs and groups where people are really chatting about it. And I think there are places where it is very overt and where people are making all kinds of theories and reading into things and throwing in evolutionary psychology and creating these grand life theories based on your looks and based on your chin. I think most of the people that you run into in the street are not going to make that confession, which is the reason for all of those secret entries, the back doors and the back alleys, right? There's still a little bit of a stigma, much less than there used to be. And one thing that there's much less of a stigma about in general is men just going to those offices and doing anything, right? It's not, you're not afraid to go, and if you're a man, and kind of walk in the door and show your face and talk about getting some work done. Also, age-wise, a lot of doctors have talked to me about a real change or an evolution in younger people going to get Botox much younger, going to get fillers much younger. It used to be that plastic surgery was something you did when you reached a certain age and you wanted to limit the physical effects of the aging and you wanted to get rid of that wrinkle or get rid of that crease or get rid of that sag. And now a lot of it is prophylactic. Like, let's do it beforehand. Let's make sure that I'm never going to get a wrinkle on my forehead ever for my life. And I'm 22 or 25 years old and I'm walking in the door. So some of the ground rules about who goes in and when and why have changed.
And I think, I in my other job, I host a tech culture podcast and an internet culture podcast. And I'm so fascinated by the way that this has roots in what you were describing, like manosphere, incel, subreddits, things like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we are seeing this impact younger and younger people. When I was growing up, there was like one girl who got a nose job in my high school, and it was like a big thing. Like everybody was asking her about it. It was like a huge thing. I think things have really changed. And, I know there's been a lot of reporting in particularly Gen Z boys doing things like chewing rock hard gum and facial fitness to sort of bulk up their jawlines in these non-surgical ways. But the sad thing is like, one, this idea of what they call looks maxing, it's rooted in, like, I would say, pretty toxic understandings of gender and race and class. And it gets down to some like really yucky junk race science stuff. But also, I think it's one of those things that just keeps increasingly younger people trying to grasp at the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So even if you woke up magically with the most square, rock hard chin you could imagine, then it's going to be your nose shape or your hairline, or like it's essentially just snake oil that keeps you on this never-ending treadmill to try to look a certain way that is almost like a fool's errand.
Yes. And yeah, you're right. There's always something to keep up with. And again, you mentioned Instagram face. You think about people today, teenagers today, 20-somethings even today, they are bombarded with images of people with certain looks and certain philosophies and makeup. And it's much more than it used to be when you could pick up a fashion magazine and then put down the fashion magazine, right? I think the volume of images coming at you suggesting that you should look a certain way is pretty overwhelming. And I think, you also have everyone wanting to be on the internet. Everyone's a presenter now. Everyone's technically on television in a way, right? A lot of the DC practitioners I spoke to, they treat patients who are on high definition TV a lot, really have a reason to look a certain way because they're always in the public eye. Well, everyone's kind of got the capacity to be in the public eye today. Everyone's on camera all the time.
And I think relating that back to DC politics is so interesting because I do think we're in a particularly telegenic, but for the internet era, where if you've got a certain look, it doesn't even really matter what you have to say, especially when we know, as you said, Donald Trump loves to look at good-looking people on television. And maybe what they're saying is sort of takes a back seat to like the fact that he likes their look. They look good on camera. They look good on TV. They project a certain kind of power or image that he likes. I do think that in this day and age, it's not surprising that people are opting for surgery to get this kind of look when that is associated with such a currency, a powerful currency in politics and in DC these days.
Oh, it's certainly a value for him. He said it outright. And I think it is a value on all of these cable networks. You kind of see that there's a certain look that gets perpetuated. There's just a certain way of dressing, of carrying yourself, and it extends to what your face looks like. And again, there's so many more opportunities to be online, to be on television, to be in the public eye in that way, that there's just got to be increasing pressure.
So this is growing everywhere, but you mentioned specifically DC. What else are you going to be watching when it comes to this? Like, how else might this be playing out?
I mean, I do think there's a whole array of fashion and style beyond just what kind of work people are getting done on their faces that would be interesting to watch. I mean, the Mar-a-Lago aesthetic extends into what are the shoes you're wearing, what are the coats you're wearing, what are the clothes you're wearing. I'm curious, again, what are the exercises that people are going to be doing that are hot, that are taken off from the internet? What are the cultural trends that people are going to gravitate to, and how are they different in this administration than they might have been 4 years ago or that they might be 8 years from now?
I just did a whole interview about how extreme thinness and I would argue probably some like not great attitudes around food and weight has become very popular. And I cannot see that as coincidental to the current political and cultural climate that we are currently in.
No, look, you are what you eat. You are what you wear. You're projecting something with every step you take out in the world in public. And if you really want to hide it, you got to go in the back alley. But otherwise, you are on display.
And take that back staircase.
That's right.
Joanna, thank you so much for being here. This has been so fun.
Thank you for having me. This has been great.
That's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, share it with your friend that can't stop gossiping about who's had what work done. We'll be back tomorrow morning with even more news from around the city. Talk to you then.